we are going to get started. Thank you all for coming and joining us today. It's been about 2 weeks or so since our last class. Sorry, I have something in my throat. Because last Monday was Shavuot, so we did not have a class last week. But we are standing at the end of the 5th chapter of Kohelet. We're going to be doing the last 3 verses of the chapter this week. And the 5th chapter itself has gone in a couple different directions, but this last piece has been primarily discussing the concept of the concept of wealth and how wealth plays into our lives and how it's many times it's not helpful. And so he's going to give us a number of different directions in which we see how wealth plays, a number of different ways that wealth affects our lives. And as I mentioned in the past classes, if it sounds cliche, well, that's because this is the source for it all. So it might be concepts you've heard elsewhere, but here's where it all comes from. So I guess it's a testament to his wisdom that ideas that he's expressing here have become common wisdom. So that's what we're dealing with right now. And the first struggle of wealth that he identified in the recent verses was the struggle of somebody who has wealth and then loses it. So wealth itself can be challenging, but perhaps even more challenging or differently challenging is what happens when you have wealth and then you lose it. And he's been talking about the idea of adapting to a new reality. When you've become used to a certain lifestyle, it's very hard to give that up and to be okay with living a new way. And as I mentioned, actually, it was very exciting because I mentioned this the last time we studied together, and then the very next day, I reached this point in my own personal learning. So it was an interesting idea, fun, cool, kind of cool that that happened. But what the Talmud tells us that if a person has wealth and then they lose it, and now they have to rely on tzedakah, on charity, it's actually the job of the charity, the people who divide up the charity, to give them charity to a degree that they can live their old lifestyle, because of how destructive and how much of a shift in their lifestyle it is to go from wealth to poverty. We actually try to give them a little bit of the semblance of what they used to have. Perhaps not everything, that would be a major strain on the community, but at least to some degree, we don't want them to have to change their lives too much. And so again, this is kind of the idea that we have, King Solomon telling us that when you have somebody who goes through such a drastic change in their lifestyle, that is one of the risks of wealth, okay? We know it also works the other way. We've discussed that in the past also, of somebody who comes into wealth suddenly, or that also has its own challenges, but in the famous words of Tevye, it's a challenge. I wouldn't mind trying that one for a while, but no, the reality, it's harder than it seems. So the last thing he mentioned, and that was verse number 16, chapter 5, verse number 16, he mentioned that if a person does not make the change, does not work to adapt to a new reality, then they're going to live a life of sickness, of anger, of fury, the right actual outward anger, because everything that they are expecting is not happening. So everything they're trying to do is just it's slipping through their fingers, and that leads to a number of major issues just in themselves. There's a seething anger inside, and then there's actual sickness, and finally you had what he called ketzef, which is a burning anger. A violent anger that's directed outwards. So that's what it's like to live without adapting to change. When you're trying to he mentioned that it's like eating with lights off. It's like eating in darkness, because you're trying to pretend that something's not there, that a problem's not there. In reality, it is there. So this week, the end of the chapter, he's going to talk about what happens if you actually do learn how to adapt, and you do learn how to create a new lifestyle for yourself. So without any further ado, I am going to jump into the screen share. so we can see that all together. Okay, give me 1 second to set my screen up for myself on my side. Okay, and this is now chapter 5, verse number 17. You'll notice this is a bit of a longer verse over here, so we'll take it piece by piece. And he says like this: Hine. Hine is a funny word. We often translate it as behold, but no one says behold. We don't really say behold nowadays. But hine means look at this. Here it is. Hine asher iti ani. I have seen. Right. That's that. Technically, he could have just said asher iti. I have seen, but it's kind of an emphasis by saying asher iti ani. I myself have seen. Tov, goodness. Asher yafet, that it is beautiful. Le'echol v'lishtot, to eat and drink. V'lirot tova, and to see goodness. V'chol emelo, with all the hard work. Sheyamol tachat hashemesh, that a person works under the sun. Mispar yemei chayav, for the number of the days of their life. Asher natan lo ha'elokim, that God gives them, kihu chelko, because that is their portion. Okay? Again, let me read that all together as one. Hine, behold, asher iti ani, I myself have seen. Tov, goodness, asher yafeh, that it is beautiful, la'achol v'lishtot, to eat and to drink, v'lirot tova, and to see goodness, v'chol amalo, with all of the hard work, shia amol tachat hashamesh, that a person works hard under the sun. Mispar yemei chayav, for the number of the days of their lives, asher natan lo ha'elokim, that God has given them, ki hu chelko, because that is their portion. So we have a number of different ideas over here. First of all, a theme that we've seen so far a number of times is that he does praise the idea of eating and drinking and seeing goodness. Okay, this is again supporting our general thesis that the book of Kohelet is not a downer of a book; it's really an empowering book. And so he does say over here that it is good for a person to be able to eat and drink and to see goodness. Now we'll have to discuss exactly what that means. But you also find over here that he has this focus on the hard work that a person does, because that is their portion, because that is the portion that the person has. And I kind of see this as being the description of a balanced life, right? As opposed to our last person, who was somebody, or the last example, which was the person who loses everything and doesn't adapt and tries to continue living in the past. This instead is the person who stays, who goes with the flow. Okay, and so they put in hard work. They're going to have to put in hard work. They can't just rely on all their power and everything that they've had, all the money that they've had so far. They need to put in hard work. But what they end up in the end of the day is chelko, is their portion. That's what they're going to get. And we do find this is you only get, a lot of the commentaries here speak this out. You get you get as a portion what you're going to get, right? There's no, I wouldn't say there's no way to affect change, but in a sense there is a little that a person can do. You can work very hard and walk away with not so much in the end of the day. Alternatively, the converse can happen, where a person can work very little and have a lot of money. That also happens. But the point is that if you have a person who recognizes their chelek, their portion, but in addition also puts in their hard work for their length of their days, that's a person who's going to be able to see goodness, who's going to be able to enjoy the things that they have. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach towards satisfaction. There's a very famous statement by the rabbis mentioned in the Ethics of Our Fathers. The rabbis say, who is a wealthy person? Ezahu ashir, who is a wealthy person? Hasameach bechelko, someone who is happy with their portion, with their lot. Okay? And the idea is, of course, that we will get what we're going to get. If we believe in a higher power that's deciding our fate, right, to a certain degree, obviously, then that opens up a whole other can of worms. So we'll avoid talking about that too much. But if we do believe in this in a God that is guiding our circumstances. So we understand that we do get a certain portion, and to be content with that, not necessarily content to the point where I don't want to do anything about it, but content with, as everything comes in, I understand that it's here as a gift from God. It's here as as part of the apportionment that God has given me. So then that's step one, that a person recognizes that. But that also can't lead a person to just being lazy with everything that they have. Okay, I'm going to get what I get, and so I don't have to put any work in. And on the contrary, he says, maybe you don't. We can discuss that there's potential to say that a person will not however much work you put in may not affect how much you actually get. We could discuss that. Again, that's not necessarily in our scope of our discussion. But let's say that's the case. Let's say that's true, that you're going to get what you're going to get, and nothing can change it. So you might sit back and say, then I don't have to do anything. It says, but you know what you're not going to achieve? Is you're not going to achieve happiness, satisfaction from what you have. And so that's what he's saying over here, that not only is it good, he says, I have seen that it is good, but he says, I also have seen that it's beautiful. Right? What's the difference between something that's good and beautiful? Something that's good is inherently good. It's inside of it, right? But it doesn't have to necessarily show off to the world. Something that's beautiful, beauty is on the outside. Beauty is on the inside too. But beauty is an expression of goodness towards the outside world, right? Something that looks beautiful, right? So in this case, it's not just something that is good in and of itself, and you might not be able to see it. And on the contrary, if you look around and you look at the world around you, this is where you'll see goodness. It will express itself in this way. When you have somebody who works hard, who puts in work, and by doing that can then go about and eat and drink and to see goodness. Okay, we'll discuss in a second what seeing goodness is. I kind of think of this like a feel-good movie, right? When you think about it, feel-good movie. Often a feel-good movie is one where you see somebody who goes through a struggle and learns to adapt to a struggle and thrives in struggle. And that's kind of when you think of a feel-good movie, that's really what it is. And in this sense also, I think there's something to say that something that looks beautiful, that looks artistic, that looks that catches our attention on the outside is when you have somebody who not only suffers but or deals with difficult situations, but at the same time also learns to adapt to them, to deal with them, to make a place for them. That is somebody who is able to, who we on the outside we can see that as beautiful. That's something that makes us happy when we see it, that makes us feel good when we see it. So I think that's kind of this intention of asher yafeh, that it is beautiful. The outside person gets to chip in and kind of see that there's beauty over there when you see somebody who has worked hard and is able to eat the fruit of their labors. So again, that's la'achol v'lishtot, to eat and to drink, and v'lirot tova, which is to see goodness. There's a kind of a difference of opinion over here, what exactly this goodness is. Rashi, the king of the commentaries, as I like to put it, he says that tova is, in this case, to see goodness is Torah, is to involve oneself in the study of Torah, like we're doing right now. So that's a self-improving act of self-improvement. The Mitzudah, which is one of the other commentaries, he says over here that it's the idea of tzedakah, of giving to others. So it's kind of, I would say, almost two different philosophies about what goodness is over here in the commentaries. They don't really go into much depth about it, but just on the surface, it would seem that there's two kind of ideas of what King Solomon means by goodness. Either he means self-improvement, which is the study of Torah, or he means improving the lives of others through charity. Either way, they're both good things to do. If a person has the ability, due to the fact that they work hard elsewhere. Yeah. So in that sense, what we have over here again is that King Solomon saying that I have seen what's good. I've seen it's not only good, but it's beautiful on the outside. Everyone can tell that it's good. That when you see a person who's able to reap the fruit of their labors, of all the hard work that they've done, for the length of their days, for the number of the days of their lives that God has given them. Of course, that's that's not something we can ever know. That's another theme of the book, that we never know when that is, what the length of our days is. But if you see a person who's able to, for at least the time that they have, is able to go and reap the fruit of their labors, that person is going to be good and beautiful. And that comes with another understanding that is chelko, that is your portion. So again, there's that kind of two-pronged way of looking at things. That on one hand, I understand that what I get is a portion, it's allotted to me, it's from God, there's perhaps part of that I might not understand. At the same time, I don't let myself get lazy because of that. I work hard and I work to do what's great. And I'm allowed, we've actually spoke about this in the first chapter, I'm allowed to feel good about the work that I've done. And that's I think a major point of what he's saying over here, is that you're allowed to, when I see a person who's enjoying what they've done and glad about the hard work that they've put in, that is not only good, it's beautiful also. It's something that we could tell on the outside, that's a good thing. So I think that's one of the lessons over here, one of the ideas that he's saying over here, is to come with this gratitude towards God, which he's going to extend to talk about more in the next verse over here, but with a gratitude towards God for what you get, and also an appreciation for what you've done, for all the hard work that you've put in. So that's our balanced life. The person who both works hard but is also appreciative. This is somebody who is now able to adapt. And he says, I had wealth, I've lost it. I'm not living the life of a wealthy person anymore, but I'm going to enjoy what I've done, my work, not just my inheritance, my work. And I'm going to do and eat and drink and see goodness with what I have, with whatever my portion is. Okay? And so with that, we're going to move on to verse number 18. And that is this over here, just highlighting it. Okay, and it says like this. Gam, kol ha'adam. Also, for all people, asher natan lo ha'elokim, that God gives them, osher unchasim, wealth and property, v'hishli to la'echol mimenu, and gives them control to eat from it, v'laseit et chelko, and to lift up their portion, v'lismoach ba'amalo, and to enjoy their work. Zo matat elokim hi, this is a gift of God. Okay, just to clarify what the also is before I read it again, the commentaries seem to indicate that that whole list of things in the beginning is all leading up to the last words. So again, what we're saying is this is a gift of God. What is a gift of God? This, and that's gam kol ha'adam. To read it again, all people, asher natan lo ha'elokim, that God gives them, osher and chasim, wealth and property, v'hishli to, and gives them control. That's an interesting word itself, but hishli to gives them control. La'achol mimenu, to eat from it. V'laseit at chelko, and to lift up, or to raise or to lift up their portion, or to carry their portion. Two meanings of the word. We'll discuss that in a minute. V'lismoach ba'amalo, and to enjoy their hard work. All those things are zo matat elokim hi. Those are gifts of God. Okay. So I think first of all, is the first thing to focus on is the fact that he mentions that this is for kol ha'adam, for all people. Meaning, don't look at our verses here and say, well, yeah, the person who had a lot and lost it all, that's the person that's learned how to adapt. But I don't have a lesson to take from that. He says, no, this is a kind of a universal lesson over here. Adaptation in the face of struggle, in the face of adversity, those are things that are those are universal. They're ubiquitous. They're things that everyone has to deal with. In fact, everyone will deal with it. That's just how life is. It would be, I can't imagine what life, if there is such a thing as a life without adversity, and that may itself be adversity, whatever. But there really is no such thing as a life without adversity. And so when we say over here that kol hadam, this applies to everybody. This is not just for our one case that we identified. This is a lesson for everybody. And it's not only just the person who struggles with adversity, it's also for the person who has the wealth. And so that's what he says over here, Asher natan lo ha'elokim, that the person that is given by God, Osher and Chasim, wealth and property. So the person does have wealth, person does have property. It's still something you have to keep in mind, that you're going to be constantly adapting to new situations, to new things that you're dealing with. And you have to figure out how to deal with those things too. Wealth itself, we're going to discuss this much more in the next chapter. That's kind of our, if you have wealth chapter. This is if you had wealth and lost it chapter. But we're going to talk about it plenty, where if a person does have wealth, how that is going to, what kind of struggles that's going to bring a person. And a person has to realize there perhaps actually I would say that there they have to work even harder to recognize that it's a portion. It's something that was given to them. It's not theirs to just do whatever they want with. So that also, that's where the gratitude piece is probably a bigger focus. It's something that's even more necessary. So somebody who does have wealth and does have possessions. Just to explain over Vehishli To, shalat means control. Actually, interestingly enough, is in modern Hebrew, shalat is a remote control. It's a remote control, right? So it controls television or whatever it is, right? So Vehishli To, also similarly in Arabic, the word sultan is related. Shaltan in Hebrew would be sultan in Arabic. The idea of control, ruler or control. Okay, so here it's the verb construction over his ve. There's the and over there. Vehishli To, and he, meaning God, gives him control, gives this person control. All right, so that's what that word is over there. Vehishli To, and gives you the control to eat from the wealth and property that a person has. So that itself is kind of an interesting idea, that a person can have wealth and not have any control over it. It's tied up. It's, it controls them. Whatever exactly. I guess there's a couple different ways we could look at that, about what it means to have control over your wealth. But let's say a person has that. Let's say a person has wealth, has property, has control over the property. So then they've got a number of things that they need to do, or hopefully they have also, I guess, kind of other prerequisites that they hopefully have, which are all in the category of gifts of God. One of them is laseit et chalko, to carry your portion, right? Laseit, the shoresh over there is, I believe the root word over there is, I believe, Yud Sin Aleph. It could be Nun Sin Aleph. I don't remember. I would have to look up to find out exactly what's the main thing, but it's the same idea. That literally means to carry one's portion. So that's the idea there, that a person has to be able to carry the portion that you have is in and of itself a gift of God. To be able to handle it, to be able to carry it with you, because it's not a simple thing to be able to handle wealth. So not only do you have it, not only have control over it, but you're also able to carry the burden of it. The Mitsuda, again, one of the commentaries, he says over here, an interesting idea, that laseit et chelko, in this case, means to be able to carry it with you to the next world. Now, we've already explained that you can't carry wealth with you to the next world, but you could do things with your wealth that, in order to make sure that they make a good effect in the next world. So that's to make sure that that a portion of it goes to charity, to make sure that it's lasting and doing good things for your for those around you. In that sense, I think it's kind of interesting, because laseit again means to carry, but naso also means to lift. Right. In fact, this past week's Torah portion was Parashat Naso, where Moses is told to lift up the heads of the Levite tribe and to give them control over the nation. So the word means both to carry but also to lift up. So I think it's kind of fitting over here that you have King Solomon telling us that you have a job or if you're lucky, basically you're able to lift up your portion. You don't just carry it, but you actually do something with it. You have what to offer to other people. You what's the word I'm looking for? You consecrate it, I guess, to a certain degree. You make something out of it. So that's laseit et chelko, to lift up your portion. And the last thing that he's saying is a gift of God is lismoach ba'amalo, is this ability to be happy with your portion. Interestingly enough, is he's not. I don't think he's yet applied this term simcha by your hard work, not in the recent verses at least. So he's saying that now we're set. Now that also the ability to enjoy your portion is a gift of God. So he has again 4 things here that he's listing as gifts, matat elokim, as gifts of God. Number 1 is again wealth itself, control over the wealth, the ability to do something with it, to raise it up, and the ability to be happy with the hard work. Those are gifts of God. So if a person does have that, has any of those things, then they should, that again kind of reminds you of that appreciativeness that he mentioned in the last verse. We recognize that these are things that we should have appreciation towards God for giving us those abilities, the ability to use our wealth in a certain way, the ability to control our wealth, the ability to be happy with what we have. In fact, I would say that there's a lot of people who don't get to do those things, whether they don't have the wealth, or whether they don't have control over the wealth, or whether they're not able to direct their wealth in the proper way, or if they're not even able to achieve happiness through their wealth. So that means that they have not been granted that gift, which it's a sad thing to consider, not being able to do all those things. And unfortunately, we all probably struggle with one or all of those things at different times in our lives. Sometimes what we have is not giving us happiness. So that lack of happiness is something that we can do something about. It's something that we can work on, as he's talked about over here, is recognizing, I would say actually part of what he wants us to do is recognize where our hard work is, and to see that and to appreciate ourselves, where we put our hard work. Like he mentioned in the last verse, we have to kind of see, what have I done? What have I accomplished? And to appreciate that, and to spend some time kind of thinking about why it's actually pretty amazing what we've done, to give ourselves a little bit of self-appreciation. So I think that's one of the ideas that he's saying over here. One other thing that I just kind of thought about is that we have this idea a lot of times that money makes money, right? You need money to make money. And by him saying over here that it's a matat elokim, that it's a gift of God, that makes you kind of question that idea, and says, oh, maybe sometimes money is not just, maybe money doesn't just come from other money. Sometimes money is something that we can work hard and we can create ourselves. We can do something ourselves to make money. Again, as a gift from God. So those are just some kind of a couple of thoughts in this verse over here. And that leads us to the last verse in the chapter, which we're going to end with tonight. And that is verse number 19. And he says, Kilo harbe yizkor et yimei chayav. Now this is a little difficult to translate. There are a number of different translations. So I'll read it one way, and then we can read it another way afterwards. But he says, not many, kilo harbe, because not many, yizkor et yimei chayav, has the ability to remember the days of their lives. Ki ha'elokim ma'aneh b'simchat libo, because God, ma'aneh, that also is up for discussion about what that word means, but I'm going to read it like most of the people translate it, which is Ki Elokim ma'aneh b'simchat libo. God testifies on the gladness of one's heart, right? To testify. We have this comes up, we say in the 10 Commandments, this is Lo ta'aneh v'reacha et shaker. Do not testify against your friend with false testimony. That's one of the 10 Commandments. So that's ta'aneh. Here's ma'aneh. Again, there's difference of opinion about what exactly this word means, but I'm sticking to that understanding. So it's kind of a funny verse. And he says again, Kilo harbe yizkor et yimei chayav. Not many will remember the days of their lives. Ki Elokim ma'aneh b'simchat libo. but God testifies to the happiness of their heart, or because God testifies to the happiness of their heart. Again, I think we've discussed this before. This word "ki" has multiple meanings, and I think in this case it's actually going to be but, right? Meaning rather, God will testify to the happiness of their heart. So that explanation is the kind of the first explanation. It's if I remember correctly, that is Mitsuda, or perhaps there's a number of commentaries to go with this understanding. That again, what we're saying over here is not many remember the days of their lives. Now, obviously, hopefully, unfortunately, there are people who actually forget all the days of their lives, and that's one of the saddest things I can think of. But then he says not many even remember the days of their lives, which is a fascinating thing. He's saying that people live forgettable lives. They live lives where they can their existence can be forgettable. They never spend time to appreciate what they had. They never spent time to take in what they had, and unfortunately, by doing that, they can't remember what happens in their life. Meaning that there's nothing to remember. There's nothing important. There's nothing very exciting to remember, and that's unfortunate. That's a bit of a downer right there. That idea is a bit of a downer. I'll admit that. So what he's saying over here is that, and in fact, he puts it the other way. Most people don't. Most people live forgettable lives in their own existences. Their existence is regrettably forgettable. They didn't treat what they had as a gift. They didn't look at it with appreciation. Again, pulling off the last verses, they don't look with appreciation towards what God gave them. They don't put in, I guess I would put it like this: when we talk about having two pieces, the hard work, but also the appreciation that it's a gift from God, but also the need to put in the hard work. If a person just has the hard work and never thinks about where it comes from, never thinks about what they could do with it, never thinks about how it's going to benefit, how they can use it to benefit other people, never thinks about how they could enjoy it, so then they're going to live a forgettable life. I think that's kind of what he's saying. So these are all pieces that you need together in order to achieve happiness through wealth or from loss of wealth or whatever it is. They're all, whether you're adapting this way or adapting that way, you need to have both those pieces, or all of these pieces really, to achieve something that's a memorable experience. And it's rare. He says rare basically that a life can create that makes memories a priority over wealth and property. Wealth and property is a means to an end of happiness, of meaningful existence. So if a person doesn't have that, then they have not created a memorable existence. That's the first explanation about what this first words of this verse mean. Rashi has another explanation, kind of a little interesting. It's a bit of a stretch to me, but he's Rashi, so I bow to his wisdom. He says that life is short. Life is in general pretty short, and so in that sense, it's easy to forget. Meaning, there's not much to remember. A person has so little time, and as Rashi puts it, why would you spend all that time on gathering on amassing wealth when you could be living instead? That seems to be how he's putting it. So much better for a person to actually just live their life instead of worrying about amassing wealth. Now, obviously, we need money for certain things, but to amass large quantities of wealth, live your life instead. That seems to be how Rashi is taking it. Because again, as he puts it, he understands that focus on the days of the life. What's the focus on those days of the life? Rashi is putting that as saying that the days of the life are really relatively short. So don't live a life where most of your life you're not going to remember anyway. So why spend it? Meaning most of the time is spent on amassing wealth. Why do that to yourself? Basically, instead, live your life while you have it. Okay, and then he ends off. King Solomon ends off with saying, "Ki, rather, what's the opposite? Elokim ma'aneh b'simchat libo." God can testify to the happiness of a person's heart. So whereas I guess sometimes we think uh, we may think that we are doing our best, or we are enjoying uh, doing what we mean to do with our wealth. There's one factor that you have to look at to see if you're actually in the right zone, and that is the happiness. And God can testify to that fact, whether you're actually happy. And if a person's not actually happy, then there needs to be a certain level of introspection that they go through. They need to think about what they're doing, because God sees that. And when we talk about He's the one who gives us the portion, He knows, I guess, whether you recognize that. Because does it come with a happiness in your own spirit? Do you recognize? Do you treat what you have with happiness because you know that it came from Him? I had just today. I was having one of those days where kind of everything was going wrong. Was trying to go over here and I got stuck in traffic, and then I went over there and I got stuck in the rain, and just everything. I was tripping over my feet everywhere I went. It was one of those days. And at some point, I got to say, I was getting pretty cranky. And then I realized, I was trying to realize that I could just as easily laugh it off. And obviously laughing it off is not always the healthy approach. But in this case, when there's just nothing to do about it, you're stuck in traffic. So you could get road rage, or you could get, any sort of thing, or you could just settle into it, learn to it, adapt to it, to a new reality, and kind of, I actually let out a laugh, because it was just at one point it was just so ridiculous, everything that was going on, and how things were not working out. I needed later in the day, I was able to vent to my wife and say, man, everything was going bad. But at least at the moment, I got a chance to just kind of sit and laugh for a second, because it's just funny sometimes. I think that's kind of what is saying over here is God can see, if you have that reaction to something, so then that's a way to test yourself, I guess, really, that you're recognizing where it's coming from. It's coming from God. And that's adaptation. That's kind of what we're trying to kind of focus on. Happiness comes from contentment. It comes from recognizing that you've done good work, but you're also receiving something from the goodwill of someone else, in this case, God. And so that's kind of what we're focusing on. And that's the happiness that we're trying to achieve. So God sees that, and He knows. He knows. So, in your own relationship with yourself, it's good to know that somebody is watching and sees where you are in that. Okay, so with that, we conclude the 5th chapter. And that's actually a perfect stopping point, because the 6th chapter is going to start off with other realities or other challenges of wealth. So we're going to get into that a little bit. Unfortunately, I'm going to be taking a short little vacation. Fortunately for me, unfortunately for the group, I guess, I'm going to be taking a little vacation for a couple of weeks. I will pick back up. You if you're on the mailing list, you will receive an email when we're starting back up again. I'm going to be out of town, so I'm not going to be able to give my class regularly. So, and this is perfect, because we'll start off with the 6th chapter. It's a great starting point, great stopping point here, and great starting point for the next chapter. So, all right, I will see you all.